Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar on increasing productivity from the inside out. I'm Melanie Greene, and for those of you who haven't met me before, I'm an occupational psychologist, and I work as a coach, trainer and mediator in all different types of businesses, public sector, private sector, large and small organisations, and for private individuals. And I work in two main areas. One is related to this is about changing from the inside out, mastering what's going on up here and how we respond to pressures and stress, and managing our mood and our state in order to increase our performance and our enjoyment in life as well. And the other area is around conflict in the workplace. And so I'm just going to say a little bit about this webinar to get us started. And so the webinar is recorded and everyone's going to be on mute and there's no video through it, because otherwise it interferes sometimes with the recording. It's going to be 30 minutes long, but I will stop at various points and see if you've got any questions. And if you've not already discovered, if you are on a screen of some sort of, whether it's your phone or a laptop, etc., if you go down to the bottom of the page, you'll see a little chat symbol. If you click on that and the chat box comes up. Oops, somebody, oh, I thought I had muted everybody. Somebody, if you can mute yourself, I thought I had everyone muted. If you can make sure you're muted, otherwise, again, we'll hear everything that you're doing if you're munching on your lunch. And what was I going to say about the chat box? So if you can wait until I ask for the questions to type them in, because contrary to popular belief is that we can't multitask when it's two cognitive tasks. So, you know, if you're doing something like ironing, you can then talk and do other things. But if it's two cognitive tasks, then performance in both of them is likely to go down. So so wait for me, hold on to your questions, wait for me when I ask, and then I'll be able to read them. Oh, someone's asked, how can they mute themselves if I'm not already muted? I think if you go down to the bottom, it should say, there should be a little symbol, microphone signal, and you should be able to click on that and mute yourself. If not, just turn off the sound on your computer. That's another way of doing it. Okay, if you are calling in on the phone, I can see one person is calling on the phone, and you don't have access to a screen. If you've got any questions afterwards, please feel free to email me. And also, if you kind of got something you want to discuss in confidence, feel free to contact me afterwards. Right, let's get on to, before I talk about the content of the webinar, after the webinar is anyone who is on this this webinar, they can have either have access to a free coaching audit for individuals. So if you're thinking about having coaching, or if you're from an organisation, I know there's people from a range of organisations here today, and you want to talk about in confidence something in your organisation, whether it's related to productivity or stress management, or to do with communication and conflict at work, then feel free to get in touch with me, and I'll send you details afterwards. So if we move on to what we're going to cover today, is the first thing that we're going to look at is looking at the difference between stress and pressure. And then we're going to look at what I call is the zone of optimal performance. And then looking at how do you manage your brain's threat response in order to stay in that zone. And then finally is look at your next steps. Because however, you know, if I'm doing a presentation to a business group, whatever I do, is I always want people to get something practical from this. And so I'll get you to think about your next steps. So first of all, we're going to look at stress versus pressure. And you find that, I don't know about you, but I come across quite a lot of people who say, actually pressure, stress is good for you. I thrive under stress. And people have the expression about, if you can't stand the heat, get out the kitchen. But there is a difference between stress and pressure, and there's often a lot of confusion about it. So let me share a model that explains this. So in this model is that you've got increasing demands and pressures as you go up the scale. And these could be demands within the workplace. And but it also could be outside. So if you think about it, is that you might have young children, you might have elderly parents that you're dealing with, your partner might be going through a difficult time, there might be health issues in the family. All of those things can add to the demands that you're facing, and increase the pressures. So it's not just looking at that in the workplace. So let's look at when we're understimulated, when there's low level of demand and pressure on us, and we're feeling understimulated. We might feel bored, demotivated, and it could be that you're very busy in what you're doing, but you've been doing it forever, and you could do it in your sleep, and you're just understimulated, and often that's it's a time to either change the way in which you do the job, or move on and find a new role, than something that's going to really kind of excite you. And then we have this, what I call a zone of optimal performance here. And this is where we have the right level of demands on us, and we feel energized, we feel excited by it, challenged, we're stretched but not strained, and obviously we're motivated, and this is where we're going to get the best performance from ourselves. And it's a great place to be, because you feel excited by things, you've got that energy, even if you're very busy, is you feel on top of things. And I have to say, thankfully that's where I feel I am right at this moment. But a lot of people are operating at the top of this zone, and if not, going over to where they are stressed and strained and overwhelmed. So once the pressures become too great, it is that feeling. And I have a lot of clients who talk about being overwhelmed, and there's those stresses and strains, and your brain goes into threat response. And I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. And what you can find is, if you are in this zone of optimal performance, but often right near the top, is it doesn't take much to tip you over. And so it may be, if you've got young children and they have chicken pox and you're up several nights in a row, is that suddenly you feel overwhelmed by everything that's on your plate. Or you suddenly found your journey to work is going to be disrupted for the next 6 months by roadworks, or bus replacement service on the trains or something like that. It doesn't take you much then to tip you over if you're right near the top there. Or something in the workplace. So, a colleague suddenly goes off sick, and you're all operating near the top of that, you're all likely to go over into overwhelm. And so I think at the moment, I'm going to, rather than talk more about this, is open it up and say, if you have got your text, your chat box open, has anybody got any questions or comments about this? So I'll just see if anybody, and while they're typing, I'm just going to say, is what I want you to think about is, what is it like to be in this zone of optimal performance? And, how do you feel? When are you there now? When have you been in that zone of optimal performance? And so any questions from anybody? Doesn't seem like it. So, okay, I will move on. We can see if there's any questions later on. So, as I was saying, it's worth looking at and thinking about, when have you been in that zone of optimal performance? It might be you're currently there. It might be sometime in the past, and you might sort of think, well, was it a particular project? Was there a team or an organization you were working for and everything just fell together and it was just right? It may be when you had less demands outside of work that made it easier. and you felt that you were in that zone. And how did you behave when you're in that zone? Is that, how does it, how did it feel? And also thinking about, well, what did you sound and look like to others? Because I certainly know that there's a certain energy in me. I'm sorry, I've just had a question or a comment come through about being in the zone. So I'm just going to read from Chantal, who says she loves being in the zone and being in the flow. And that's very true, is that you get into that flow state. And she says, I'm there when I'm writing copy for clients or in face-to-face meetings, but I get stressed when I have to think about too much work and I miss a client deadline. And so we're going to talk about how to handle that in a minute. Oh, right. So I've got here Andrew, who's an accountant, and 31st of January is looming. So he's woke up last night thinking, we're not going to get everything done in time. Help! And realizing it's all nonsense in the cold light of day. But I'm going to go on and talk about the brain's threat response and how to manage your brain, because I think that's going to help both of you and everybody else on the call when we get into that state. So, so staying in the zone or getting in the zone is one aspect of it. Obviously, there's lots of different things that you can do, but one aspect is about managing your brain. And I love this picture, for those of you who can see the screen, is that not only is it lovely and colourful about the brain, but actually I think it represents often what is going on in people's brains. And I was running a course on resilience earlier on this week, and a lot of the participants were talking about actually never being able to switch off when they're, when they're away from work. They're still thinking about work. It's stopping them from enjoying their family life, their social life, but also people talking about overthinking things, which is, I suppose, what, Andrew was kind of saying at night, overthinking things. And it starts to look a bit like this, kind of very muddled and splattered. So I want to talk about the brain. And the brain it's designed to look out for risks and threats and take appropriate action to keep us safe. And it was designed for when we were in survival mode and we're cavemen and cavewomen, and it still reacts in the same sort of way. And you have the great thing is, in recent times, or the last kind of 5 or 6 years, neuroscientists are able to carry out experiments when people are in MRI scanners. And so they can see what is being lit up in their brain. And one of the things they found is that the brain is either in reward response, where you want to move towards something, so you're looking forward to a holiday, or it might be even something in the workplace. So I love what I do. I really look forward to running courses or doing presentations, etc. So that's my reward response. I'm looking forward to it. Whereas the threat response is saying, this is something I don't like, it seems to be threatening, I want to move away. And so we're going to explore the threat response in more depth. And as I said before, that the threat response is about, and the brain is about seeking to minimize uncertainty and reduce threat. And when the threat response is triggered in our brain, it's that the amygdala is triggered, the adrenaline rush that we have, and our dopamine levels go down. And so this is all about gearing up for fight, flight, or freeze. So that when we were, cavemen and cavewomen, and that saber-toothed tiger came along, is that for sometimes freezing was a safe option. So because if everybody else was running away, and if you froze, then the saber-toothed tiger is likely to ignore you, and actually, because they just might not see you, and go towards the others. And have you ever had that situation where perhaps you're in a conversation, you're in a meeting, and somebody says something, and you're so, something outrageous, or they're dismissive of you, and you're so enraged by it, but you're just kind of frozen. Or we get the fight or flight. So the fight is, we think, right, that's it. And you go and answer, and then you say it in the wrong way, the wrong tone of voice, and then things escalate. Or you have the flight response, where actually, I just want to get out of this meeting and out of this situation as quick as possible. And it's designed for that fight or flight. So our blood goes away, well, it goes to our major organs, it goes to our heart, our lungs, it goes to our limbs. So it's designed fight or flight, it goes away from our brain. And also with the chemical reactions is that one of the things that neuroscientists have found out is that we become tunnel visioned. Because it was about running or it's about staying and fighting, not thinking creatively about the issues and the problems that we face. Our working memory decreases, we lack insight, we become more pessimistic. So it's not in a great place to tackle a lot of the things that we're having to do in the workplace. So what I want to do is give you a few sort of hints and tips about what to do in the moment to reduce that threat response. Now, there are things, so when I was running this course on resilience and stress management earlier on this week, and we were looking at sort of what do you do day by day, what do you do at the beginning of the day and during and at the end to kind of support yourself and manage your mood and state. But there are things you can do in the moment that can help you. So I'd like to talk about those. So, oops, flick on to the next slide. So this is about dampening down the threat response in yourself. And I think I like the cartoon. It's from my book about mastering your inner critic. And I think we sometimes forget that we do have control over our emotions. We often, we allow other people to, to say, well, actually, they've made me miserable, they've made me angry, rather than we can start to take control of things. But let's get back to the threat response. And and drawing upon Chantal and Andrew and what they were saying in the chat box, is that you can use these in any situation. So you could use them if you're in a meeting and suddenly something happens and your threat response is triggered. Or you can use them if you're sat at your computer thinking, oh my God, how am I going to, Andrew, accountants having terrible time at this time of year, is thinking, how am I going to get things done? Is that you can use some of these techniques to dampen down your threat response so that you can get into that reward response. That means that you're much more optimistic, you can see clearly, you can think clearly and find a way forward. So the first thing is about focusing on the here and now, and which doesn't mean you don't plan ahead, but what neuroscientists have found out is that about 80% of the time we're in the stories in our head rather than in the here and now. And so if your stories in your head are about waking up in the middle of the night and worrying about not meeting deadlines, worrying about that client meeting you've got coming up or the one you've just had, is rather than coming into the here and now. So if you're sat at your desk or if you're sat in a meeting, it's, feeling your bottom on the chair, feeling what, your shoulders, getting into more relaxed position, breathing slowly and deeply to counteract the threat response, and also changing your posture. Is that we often find as we start to kind of slump down when we're feeling, the weight of the world on top of us, we're in a very different posture than we are when we're feeling confident and good. So just changing posture, breathing deeply, focusing on the here and now can start to dampen down the threat response. But also the fourth point there is about looking up briefly. So where we look, we access different parts of our brain, and that affects how we feel. So it tends to be that if we are engaging in that negative internal dialogue, like I'm not going to meet those deadlines, is that we tend to look down. It's that kind of head in the hands experience. And I would say there's no coincidence that we have an expression about being down in the dumps. We also have the expression chin up. And when we look up, roughly to where the wall meets the ceiling, is we access our visual cortex. And that has two positive things. Is one, is that you can, while you're looking up, it's almost impossible to have a negative emotion or thought, because you have to look down to access a different part of your brain to access that. But also you can visualize how you're going to approach things. So if you're sat at your desk and you're worrying about things, is looking up, and I can send you a whole exercise about visualization, but you can look up and think, okay, so what's my top priority? What are the things that I need to do? Is there something that I need to get help on or talk to somebody about? But you can start to see a way forward. And it might seem really, really simple, and you might be listening to some of this thinking, Melanie, this can't possibly help. But I can assure you, I practice what I preach, and so do my clients. And these little things make a huge difference. The other thing is about engaging your wise adult self. And it's very easy that when we are feeling, I use a model called transactional analysis, which is the parent, adult, child, which is about how we communicate with other people, but it's going on within us as well. And I can always send you a handout about that if you're interested. But the wise adult self is as distinct from our fearful inner child. So we have an inner fearful child who might be going, but what if this happens? What if that? What if I upset this client? What if, I don't meet these deadlines? Or kind of going into critical controlling parent, which if you're in a meeting situation is not a helpful mode to be in. Or if you're managing people as well, it's not a good mode to be in. And in fact, I was talking to some clients recently, and they were saying that actually part of their, a big part of their problems is actually a lot of the managers are being very controlling. And that's causing stress, and it's also stifling people's innovation, etc. So engaging your wise adult self, that bit of you that is calm and rational and logical, that can look ahead. It's always in there, but it gets lost by all our fears and our threat response, etc. And sometimes about removing yourself from the situation. So if you're in a meeting and it's just getting a bit out of control or heated, obviously it depends on your role in the meeting and who's chairing it, but sometimes, or if you're in a one-to-one situation, but sometimes say, look, can we just have a quick break and let's go and get a cup of coffee? Or even kind of going, actually, I just need to go to the toilet right now. Whatever it is, just to remove yourself from the situation. And you do sometimes find that when people have a short break, and even if everybody else doesn't know about this stuff, when they come back, they've quietened down a bit. So that can be useful. As I say, there's lots of other tools and techniques, but these can be very useful in the moment. So we've got some time before I kind of go on to the action planning. So any questions that anybody has? So if any of you got access to the chat box, if you come on late and you don't know where the chat box is, there's an icon at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that, then you can ask a question. So any questions there? I know it takes time and people typing away ferociously. So if I suddenly see some pop up, I might come back to them. All right, okay. So the next steps, what is it that you're going to do? Because I'd like this, you've given up a half an hour of your time. Oh, hang on, we've got somebody. Hang on a moment, let me just go back. And so Andrew says, over the years, I've learned that whatever I worry about in the middle of the night is mostly rubbish. One of the things about the thing is, it might be mostly rubbish. The thing is, it's keeping you awake. And one of the things that I do and also get my clients to do, and they have found it incredibly useful, is to, before you go to bed or sometime in the evening, is to write out all your fearful child's what ifs and just go through everything. And it is all rubbish, but it's true. And if you don't listen to that inner fearful child, he or she will wake you up in the middle of the night. And it might be rubbish, but if you write it all down and then engage your wise adult self to say, well, actually, that bit, don't worry, it's never going to happen. That bit, this is what we can do. You may well find, and I certainly find, and my clients find, is you sleep much better at night if you deal with it before you go to bed. So I hope that helps, Andrew. So next steps. I always ask my clients about, what are you going to keep doing that works for you? So what is working already in terms of productivity? We've only looked at one tiny thing, is that, you might have amazing time management systems. You might have different other ways of managing your mood and your state. There might be things that your organization does that helps. But think about, what are you going to keep doing that works? What do you want to develop further? So it might be about, well, actually, I want to be more in the here and now. To help you to manage your threat response. Maybe it's about actually developing the ability to spot when your threat response is triggered, because people often they go through. So they go through. The whole of the day, kind of their energy levels and their mood going down and down, not realizing that if they could spot it very early, they could do something about it and turn it around and get back into that zone of optimal performance. And also, what do you need to let go of? So people sometimes, people will say things like, well, I need to let go of my impatience. I just get so impatient everywhere. I'm impatient in this car. I'm impatient in the supermarket. I'm impatient with my colleagues. Actually, that doesn't help anybody, and it starts to trigger low-level threat response. It might be letting go of frustrations, or letting go of fear, or letting go of perfectionism. There's if you're a perfectionist, you might want to talk to me further and about overcoming the tyranny of perfectionism. So I just want you to think about that. And as I said, I can send you information. I offer free coaching audit for individuals and also free consultations for organisations. So we've got a few minutes left. So are there any final questions or comments that people want to make? And while people are typing, I've just seen actually somebody else. So Kirsty was saying that they always take a small notebook with her, and as she starts to feel overwhelmed and into threat response, writes down everything that's swimming around in her head. And I think that's really excellent. I have a journal. I always take it with me wherever I go, and I encourage my clients, especially my coaching clients, to have a notebook or a journal. I think get it out of your head. It makes a huge difference, and there's lots of different kind of tools and techniques. If you've not been on my website, which is inspiretransformation.co.uk, there's under free resources, there's all of my back issues of my free coaching newsletter, Inspire, that's got lots of tools and techniques that you can use, and you can use in your journal, etc. So I think it's other people asking for the handout on TA. So I will follow up. I will send you the link to this, because you might want to share it with colleagues or contacts or whoever. Feel free to share the recording. I'll send you the handout about TA, and feel free to get back in touch with me at any time. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on this webinar. I'm sure you've all got busy days, but I hope it has been helpful and it's given you some ideas. And I look forward to seeing you on future webinars. So goodbye.